I am 85 years old, and this house is too quiet now. Not the kind of quiet you enjoy, but the kind that slowly eats you alive. Every morning, I wake up before the sun rises. Not because I have plans, not because I have somewhere to go, but because sleep doesn't stay with me anymore. The silence pulls me out of bed like it's calling my name, and when I sit there in that same old chair, I sometimes wonder, how did it all become like this? Because there was a time this house was full of life. Laughter used to echo through these walls. Tiny footsteps ran across the floor. Toys were scattered everywhere. My children, my whole world filled every corner of this home with noise, with chaos, with happiness. I still remember those days so clearly. I worked tirelessly day and night just to give them a better life. There were days I skipped meals so they could eat more. I wore the same old clothes for years just so they could have new ones. I never complained, not even once, because their smiles were enough for me. Their happiness was my success. But life changes. Slowly, quietly, everything began to fade. My son got a job in another city. I still remember the day he left. He hugged me and said, "I'll visit you soon, Father." My daughter got married. She held my hand and promised, "Don't worry, I'll call you every day." And at first they did. The phone used to ring every week, then every month, and then nothing. Now, the phone rarely rings. Sometimes I sit beside it for hours, just staring at it, hoping it might light up, hoping to see their names on the screen. But it stays silent, just like the rest of my life. I tried calling them, but they always seemed busy. Not now. "Father, I'll call you later." That later, it never came. Days turned into months and months into years. And somewhere in between I learned how to live alone. I cook for myself, even though I don't feel hungry anymore. Food doesn't taste the same when you eat it in silence. I talk to myself sometimes just to hear a voice in the room. Sometimes I even pretend someone is listening. It sounds strange, doesn't it? But loneliness makes you do things you never imagined. Every evening I sit by the window. I watch people passing by, families laughing, children holding their parents' hands, and for a moment I close my eyes and I imagine that it's me again, that I'm not alone, that my children are still here running around calling me Father. But when I open my eyes, reality hits even harder. I am alone, completely alone. Last winter was the hardest. I got sick. There was no one to bring me medicine, no one to ask if I was okay, no one to sit beside me. I lay in bed for days staring at the ceiling wondering, is this how it ends? And you know what hurt the most? Not the sickness, not even the loneliness, but the realization that the people I gave my entire life to weren't there when I needed them the most. I don't hate them. No, I could never hate my children. I just don't understand. Was I a bad father? Did I fail somewhere? Or is this just how life works now? Sometimes I take out the old photo albums. I look at their childhood pictures, their innocent smiles, the way they used to hug me so tightly like they would never let go. And I ask myself, what changed? Maybe it's not them, maybe it's time. Time takes everything away slowly, silently, without asking. Now, I don't wait for phone calls anymore. I don't expect visits. I have stopped hoping. But deep inside, there is still a small part of me that waits. Waits for a knock on the door, waits for a familiar voice to say, "Father, we are here." But the door never knocks. And the silence, loneliness in old age is not just about being physically alone. It is a deep emotional emptiness that slowly takes over every part of life. It is the kind of silence that feels heavy, where even the smallest sounds become noticeable because there is nothing else to fill the space. The ticking of a clock, the creaking of a chair, the faint noise of wind outside the window all become constant reminders that there is no one around to share a moment with. Days begin to feel longer, not because time has changed, but because there is no one to talk to, no one to laugh with, and no one to make memories with anymore. For many elderly people, loneliness does not arrive suddenly. It grows quietly over time. Children grow up, build their own lives, and move away, often with good intentions and promises to stay connected. At first, the distance feels manageable because calls still come, visits still happen, and there is still a sense of belonging, but slowly those calls become less frequent, visits become rare, and the connection begins to fade. What remains is a quiet home filled with memories where every corner reminds them of a life that once felt complete. The emotional impact of this loneliness is much deeper than most people realize. It creates a feeling of being forgotten, as if their presence no longer matters in the lives of those they once lived for. It is not anger that grows in their hearts, but a silent sadness, a question that keeps repeating in their minds about where things changed and why. They begin to talk less, not because they have nothing to say, but because there is no one left who truly listens. Even simple things like sharing a meal or watching television lose their meaning when experienced alone. Loneliness also changes the way a person sees the world around them. Watching other families together, seeing children holding their parents' hands, or hearing laughter from nearby homes can bring a mix of warmth and pain at the same time. It reminds them of what they once had and what they have lost. They often find themselves living more in their memories than in the present, revisiting moments when they felt loved, needed, and surrounded by people who cared. Over time, this isolation can affect not only emotional well-being but also physical health. Without someone to check on them, small problems can grow into serious issues. There is no one to notice when they are unwell, no one to encourage them to take care of themselves, and no one to provide comfort during difficult moments. The absence of human connection makes even minor struggles feel overwhelming, and the lack of support can make life feel heavier with each passing day. Despite all this, many elderly people continue to hold on to a small piece of hope. They wait for a phone call, a message, or a visit that might break the silence. Even if they say they no longer expect it, that quiet hope stays alive deep within them, giving them a reason to keep going, even when everything around them feels empty. Fading family bonds rarely break all at once. They loosen slowly, almost invisibly, until one day the connection that once felt unshakable becomes distant and fragile. It often begins with small changes that seem harmless at first. A missed call, a delayed reply, a visit postponed because of work or responsibilities. These moments are easy to ignore in the beginning because love is still there, and the belief that nothing has truly changed remains strong. But over time, these small gaps grow wider, and what was once a strong, daily connection becomes occasional and uncertain. In earlier years, family is everything. Conversations flow naturally, laughter fills the home, and even ordinary moments feel meaningful because they are shared. There is a sense of closeness that doesn't need effort, it simply exists. Parents and children are deeply connected through routines, care, and constant presence, but as life moves forward, priorities shift. Children grow older, their worlds expand, and their attention slowly turns toward careers, relationships, and personal goals. It is a natural part of life, yet it carries an unspoken cost that is often realized too late. Distance plays a role, but it is not always physical. Even when people live far apart, bonds can remain strong if nurtured with time and attention. What truly weakens relationships is emotional distance, when conversations become shorter, less frequent, and less meaningful. Words begin to lose warmth, and communication becomes more of a formality than a genuine connection. Questions like, "How are you?" are asked out of habit rather than concern, and answers become brief, hiding the deeper feelings that no one takes the time to explore. Promises are often made with sincerity, but life has a way of distracting people from keeping them. "I'll call you tomorrow" turns into next week, then next month, and eventually becomes something forgotten. "I'll visit soon" remains an idea that never becomes reality. These broken promises are not always intentional, yet they slowly erode trust and closeness. For the one who is waiting, each unfulfilled promise feels like a small loss, a quiet confirmation that they are no longer a priority. As bonds fade, silence begins to take their place. Conversations that once lasted for hours turn into brief exchanges, and sometimes into nothing at all. The effort to stay connected starts coming from only one side, and when that effort is not returned, it becomes harder to keep trying. Eventually, Even the strongest relationships can feel unfamiliar, as if the people who once knew each other so well have become strangers over time. What makes fading family bonds so painful is not just the distance itself, but the memories of what once was. The contrast between the past and the present becomes impossible to ignore. Moments that were filled with love, care, and understanding are replaced by emptiness and silence. It leaves behind questions that are difficult to answer, wondering how something so strong could become so weak without anyone truly noticing when it started to slip away. Parental sacrifice is often quiet, unnoticed, and taken for granted, yet it forms the foundation of a child's entire life. It begins long before a child understands the meaning of love or responsibility. Parents give without keeping count, without expecting anything in return, simply because their child's happiness becomes their purpose. Every decision they make, every hardship they endure, is shaped by the desire to provide a better life for the ones they love. These sacrifices are not always grand or visible. Sometimes they exist in the smallest moments. A parent skipping a meal so their child can eat a little more, wearing the same old clothes for years just to afford something new for their children, working long hours even when exhausted, just to ensure that school fees are paid on time and dreams remain possible. They hide their struggles behind smiles, making sure their children never feel the weight of the difficulties they carry every day. What makes these sacrifices so powerful is the love behind them. It is a selfless kind of love, one that does not seek recognition or reward. Parents do not measure what they give, nor do they remind their children of what they have done. For them, seeing their child happy, safe, and successful is enough. That joy becomes their greatest achievement, their reason to keep going even when life becomes overwhelming. As children grow, they often remain unaware of the depth of these sacrifices. They see the results but not the effort behind them. They enjoy the comfort, the opportunities, and the care without realizing how much was given up to create that life for them. It is only much later, sometimes too late, that they begin to understand the silent struggles their parents faced. By then, the moments that could have been shared with gratitude may already be gone. Parental sacrifice also means putting a child's needs above personal desires. Dreams are postponed, ambitions are set aside, and personal comfort is often sacrificed to ensure that children have every chance to succeed. Parents may choose stability over passion, security over risk, simply because they cannot afford to fail when others depend on them. Their lives become centered around responsibility, and their own needs slowly fade into the background. Even when children become independent and move on with their lives, the sacrifices do not truly end. Parents continue to care, to worry, and to hope for their children's happiness. They remain emotionally invested, always ready to support, even if they receive little in return. Their love remains constant, unchanged by distance, time, or neglect. The most heartbreaking part is that these sacrifices are often remembered only when it is too late to express gratitude. The quiet efforts, the sleepless nights, the years of hard work all become memories that cannot be repaid. And in that realization, one begins to see that parental sacrifice was never about obligation, but about a deep and unconditional love that expected nothing, yet gave everything. Unfulfilled promises often begin with sincerity, spoken in moments filled with emotion and good intentions. Words like, "I'll call you later," or "I'll visit soon," are not usually meant to hurt. They are said with the belief that there will always be another chance, another day to follow through. At the time, they feel comforting, creating a sense of reassurance that the connection will remain strong despite distance or busy schedules. But as time passes, those words slowly lose their meaning when they are not followed by action. At first, the delay seems understandable. Life gets busy, responsibilities grow, and priorities shift. A missed call today can be made up tomorrow. A postponed visit can be planned for next week. There is always a reason, always an excuse that feels valid in the moment. The person waiting often understands, choosing patience over disappointment. Believing that the promise still holds value, they hold on to those words, trusting that they will eventually turn into reality. But when promises continue to remain unfulfilled, something begins to change. The waiting becomes longer, and the hope that once felt strong starts to weaken. Each later that never arrives creates a small crack in the bond. Not enough to break it instantly, but enough to slowly damage the trust that once felt secure. Over time, these small cracks begin to add up, turning into a quiet realization that the words being spoken are no longer reliable. For the one who is waiting, unfulfilled promises carry a deeper emotional weight than most people realize. It is not just about a missed call or a delayed visit. It is about feeling unimportant, as if their time, their presence, and their emotions no longer matter. Every time the phone does not ring, every time the door remains closed, it reinforces the feeling that they have been placed somewhere far down the list of priorities. The pain does not come from anger, but from a silent sadness that grows with each passing day. What makes it even more difficult is that these promises often come from people they love the most. There is no desire to blame or accuse, only a longing to understand why something so simple has become so difficult. The heart continues to make excuses on their behalf, trying to protect the bond that still exists. But deep inside there is an awareness that something has changed, that the connection is no longer what it once was. As time goes on, the words themselves begin to lose their impact. "I'll call you later" no longer brings comfort. It becomes something expected but not believed. The anticipation fades, replaced by a quiet acceptance that the promise will likely remain unfulfilled once again. Eventually, the person waiting may stop expecting altogether, not because they no longer care, but because they are tired of hoping for something that never comes. Unfulfilled promises do not just break plans. They slowly break trust, weaken relationships, and create emotional distance that is difficult to repair. What once felt like a strong and loving bond becomes fragile, held together only by memories of a time when words were followed by actions and promises truly meant something. Emotional neglect is one of the most silent and overlooked forms of pain because it leaves no visible scars, yet it deeply affects the heart and mind. It is not about being physically abandoned, but about feeling invisible even when the people you love still exist somewhere in your life. It happens when attention, care, and emotional presence slowly disappear, leaving behind a sense of emptiness that is difficult to explain to others. At first, emotional neglect is subtle. Conversations become shorter, less meaningful, and less frequent. The warmth that once existed in words begins to fade, replaced by routine responses and distant tones. Questions are asked but not truly listened to. Answers are given but not truly felt. Over time, this lack of genuine connection creates a gap that continues to grow, even if the relationship itself still technically exists. For someone experiencing emotional neglect, the hardest part is not the silence itself, but what that silence represents. It feels like being forgotten, like no longer being a priority in the lives of those who once cared deeply. The absence of small gestures like checking in, asking how someone feels, or simply being present becomes more painful than any argument or conflict. It is a quiet kind of hurt that builds slowly, making a person question their own importance. This kind of neglect often leads to self-doubt. A person begins to wonder if they have done something wrong, if they have failed in some way, or if they are no longer worthy of attention and love. They may replay past moments in their mind, searching for answers that never come. Instead of blaming others, they turn inward, questioning themselves and trying to understand what caused the distance. Emotional neglect also changes how a person expresses themselves. They may begin to speak less, not because they have nothing to say, but because they feel that their words no longer matter. Sharing thoughts and feelings becomes difficult when there is no response or understanding on the other side. Gradually, they may withdraw, choosing silence over the pain of being ignored or dismissed. What makes this experience even more painful is that it often happens within close relationships. It is not strangers who cause this kind of hurt. but the very people who once provided comfort and support. This makes it harder to confront or even acknowledge because the bond still exists. Yet it no longer provides the emotional connection it once did. Over time, emotional neglect can create a deep sense of loneliness. Even when a person is not physically alone, it becomes possible to feel isolated in a world where connections exist but lack depth and sincerity. The heart longs for genuine interaction, for someone who truly listens, understands, and cares, but that need remains unmet. Despite this, many people continue to hope that things will change. They wait for a moment of attention, a meaningful conversation, or a simple gesture that shows they still matter. That hope may become quieter over time, but it rarely disappears completely, staying hidden beneath the surface as a reminder of the connection they still wish to feel. Changing times have quietly reshaped the way families connect, often in ways that are not immediately noticeable but deeply felt over the years. Life today moves faster than it ever did before, with constant demands, responsibilities, and distractions pulling people in different directions. What once felt simple, like spending time together, having long conversations, or visiting loved ones regularly, has gradually become something that requires effort and planning. In the middle of all this change, relationships that once thrived on presence and attention begin to weaken without anyone fully realizing it. In earlier times, family connections were often stronger because life itself was slower and more centered around shared experiences. People spent more time at home, interacted face-to-face, and built bonds through daily routines. Conversations were not rushed, and moments of togetherness were a natural part of life. There was a sense of closeness that came from being physically and emotionally present, where people truly knew and understood each other. As the world has changed, so have priorities. Work has become more demanding, often requiring long hours and constant focus. Technology, while connecting people across distances, has also created a different kind of separation. Messages and calls have replaced personal visits, and quick replies have taken the place of meaningful conversations. It has become easier to stay in touch on the surface, but harder to maintain deep, emotional connections that require time and attention. This shift has made it easier for distance to grow, even within families. Children grow up in a world where independence is encouraged, and success is often measured by personal achievements rather than the strength of relationships. As they build their own lives, their attention naturally shifts toward their goals, careers, and responsibilities. While this is a normal part of growth, it often leads to less time and energy being given to the relationships that once shaped their lives. For parents, this change can feel confusing and painful. They remember a time when family was at the center of everything, when being together was not something that needed to be scheduled or planned. The contrast between those memories and the present reality creates a sense of loss that is difficult to explain. It is not just about physical distance, but about the feeling that emotional closeness has been replaced by occasional communication and brief interactions. Changing times also influence how people express care and affection. What once involved physical presence, shared meals, and long conversations has now been reduced to short messages, quick phone calls, or social media interactions. While these forms of communication can maintain a connection, they often lack the depth and warmth that comes from being truly present with someone. Over time, this difference becomes more noticeable, especially for those who long for the kind of connection they once knew. Despite all these changes, the need for human connection remains the same. The desire to feel valued, remembered, and loved does not disappear with time. What has changed is how easily these needs can be overlooked in a world that moves so quickly. As life continues to evolve, it becomes more important than ever to recognize that relationships require effort, and that even in the busiest of times, making space for the people who matter can make all the difference in keeping those bonds from slowly fading away. Hope and reality often exist side by side, but they do not always move in the same direction. Hope is gentle, patient, and persistent, holding on even when there is little reason left to believe. Reality, on the other hand, is firm and unchanging. revealing the truth in ways that cannot be ignored forever. When someone waits for love, attention, or connection that never arrives, they find themselves caught between these two forces, trying to hold on to one while slowly being pulled toward the other. In the beginning, hope feels strong. It gives meaning to waiting and makes the silence easier to bear. A missed call is not seen as neglect but as a delay. A promise not kept today is expected to be fulfilled tomorrow. There is always a reason to believe that things will improve, that the bond still exists, and that the distance is only temporary. This hope keeps the heart open, allowing a person to remain patient and understanding even when disappointment begins to appear. As time passes, reality starts to show itself more clearly. Days go by without any contact, weeks pass without a message, and the silence becomes harder to explain. The reasons that once felt acceptable begin to lose their strength. The idea that someone is simply busy starts to feel less convincing when the absence continues for so long. Reality does not arrive suddenly. It reveals itself slowly through repeated moments of absence that can no longer be ignored. This creates an internal struggle. Part of the heart continues to hope, refusing to let go of the belief that things can return to the way they were. It clings to memories, to promises, and to the emotional connection that once felt so real. At the same time, another part begins to accept what is happening, recognizing that the waiting may not lead to anything at all. This conflict between hope and reality can be exhausting, as it forces a person to live between expectation and truth. Waiting becomes more painful when hope remains but reality does not change. Each passing day without a call or visit adds to the weight of disappointment. The mind may start to prepare for the truth, but the heart continues to resist it. Letting go of hope can feel like losing the last piece of connection, even if that connection exists only in memory. So the waiting continues even when it begins to hurt more than it comforts. Over time, hope may begin to fade, not all at once, but little by little. It becomes quieter, less certain, and less able to overcome the evidence of reality. The anticipation that once brought comfort turns into a habit, something that continues without the same belief behind it. A person may stop expecting, but deep inside, a small part of them still waits, holding on to the possibility that something might change. This balance between hope and reality leaves a lasting emotional impact. It teaches how deeply a person can care, how long they can wait, and how much they can endure without receiving what they long for. Even when reality becomes clear, the memory of that hope remains, a reminder of the love and connection that once existed, and the quiet desire that it might somehow return again. A message to society about caring for parents is not just a reminder, it is a responsibility that often goes unnoticed until it is too late. In the rush of modern life, people become deeply focused on their own goals, careers, and personal struggles, often forgetting the very individuals who once made their lives possible. Parents, who once stood at the center of everything, slowly move to the edges, not because they matter less, but because they are quietly taken for granted. As children grow older, independence becomes a priority. Building a future, achieving success, and managing responsibilities take up most of their time and energy. While these pursuits are important, they often come at the cost of meaningful connection with parents. A simple phone call is delayed, a visit is postponed, and slowly, these small actions turn into long periods of absence. What may seem like a minor delay to one person can feel like a deep silence to someone who is waiting. Society as a whole has begun to normalize this distance, treating it as an unavoidable part of life. Being busy has become an acceptable reason for not staying connected, and emotional distance is often overlooked because physical needs are assumed to be enough. But caring for parents is not only about providing financial support or ensuring their basic needs are met. It is about presence, attention, and emotional connection, the simple acts that make them feel valued and remembered. The truth is, parents do not ask for much. They do not expect constant attention or grand gestures. What they truly need is time, a few moments of genuine conversation, a visit that shows they are still important, a call that reassures them they are not forgotten. These small acts carry immense value, often far greater than material support. They bring comfort, reduce loneliness, and remind parents that their role in their children's lives has not ended. Ignoring this responsibility does not always feel like a serious mistake in the present. Life continues, routines remain unchanged, and the absence of connection becomes normal. But over time, this neglect leaves a lasting impact not only on parents but also on children themselves. There comes a moment when realization sets in, when the opportunity to give time, attention, and love no longer exists. Regret then replaces what could have been simple acts of care, creating a sense of loss that cannot be undone. Caring for parents is also about recognizing their sacrifices and acknowledging the role they played in shaping who we are. It is about understanding that the love and effort they gave throughout their lives deserve to be returned not out of obligation, but out of gratitude and respect. This awareness should not come only in moments of loss, but while there is still time to act on it. As a society, there needs to be a shift in how these relationships are valued. Success should not be measured only by personal achievements, but also by the strength of the bonds we maintain with those who raised us. Taking time for parents should not feel like a burden, but like an essential part of life, because in the end, what truly matters is not how busy life was or how many goals were achieved, but whether the people who once gave everything for us felt loved, remembered, and cared for while they were still here. If you are listening to my story, please don't let your parents feel this way. Call them, visit them, sit with them, because one day, when they are gone, you will wish you had more time, more moments, more conversations, but by then it will be too late. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something deep inside, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss a story that reminds us what truly matters in life. Silent suffering is a kind of pain that lives beneath the surface, hidden from the eyes of others, yet deeply felt within. It is the act of enduring hardship without speaking about it, not because the pain is small, but because there is no one to truly listen or understand. It becomes easier to remain quiet than to explain feelings that might be ignored, misunderstood, or dismissed. Over time, silence becomes a habit, and suffering becomes something carried alone. This kind of suffering often grows in spaces where once there was connection. When a person feels heard and valued, they naturally express their emotions, their fears, and their struggles. But when that connection fades, so does the willingness to speak. Words begin to feel heavy, as if they have no place to go. Even when there is a desire to open up, the absence of a listening ear makes it feel pointless, so the pain stays inside unspoken, slowly becoming a part of everyday life. Silent suffering is not always visible in behavior. A person may continue their routine, carry on with daily tasks, and appear calm on the outside. They may smile when expected, respond politely, and avoid drawing attention to themselves. But beneath that calm surface, there can be a storm of emotions: loneliness, sadness, confusion, and even a sense of helplessness. The effort it takes to maintain this outer appearance can be exhausting, yet it becomes necessary to avoid burdening others or facing rejection. One of the most difficult aspects of silent suffering is the feeling of being alone in it. Without sharing, there is no reassurance, no comfort, and no validation of what one is going through. Doubts can grow stronger, and thoughts can become heavier without anyone to help lighten them. The mind begins to circle around the same worries, repeating questions without answers, making the burden feel even greater. This silence can also create distance between people, even when they are not physically far apart. When someone stops expressing their emotions, others may assume that everything is fine. The absence of visible struggle can lead to a lack of concern, reinforcing the cycle of silence. The more a person hides their pain, the less likely it is to be noticed, and the less likely it is to be addressed. Over time, silent suffering can affect not only emotional well-being but also physical health. The weight of unspoken pain can lead to stress, fatigue, and a general sense of heaviness that makes even simple tasks feel difficult. Without an outlet, the body and mind both carry the burden. often without relief. Despite all this, there is often a quiet strength in those who endure silently. They continue to move forward, to survive each day. Even when it feels overwhelming, they find ways to cope, even if those ways are not always enough to ease the pain completely. And deep within, there is often a small hope that one day someone will notice, someone will ask, and someone will truly listen, giving them the chance to finally let their silence break. Memories of the past have a unique way of holding on, especially when the present feels empty and quiet. They become more than just moments that once happened. They turn into a place of comfort, a way to revisit a time when life felt fuller and more meaningful. For someone who is alone, these memories are not just thoughts. They are a form of companionship, filling the silence with echoes of laughter, voices, and emotions that once made life feel complete. In earlier years, those moments were lived without much thought. Simple things like sitting together at the dinner table, sharing stories, or hearing children laugh in another room felt ordinary at the time. No one stops to realize that these everyday moments are the ones that will later become the most valuable. It is only when they are gone that their true worth becomes clear, when the absence of those sounds and feelings creates a space that nothing else can fill. As time passes, memories often become clearer than the present. Faces, voices, and small details remain vivid, as if they are still happening somewhere just out of reach. A person may remember the exact way their child used to smile, the sound of their footsteps running through the house, or the feeling of a warm embrace that once brought comfort and joy. These memories carry both warmth and pain at the same time. Warmth because they remind of love, and pain because they can no longer be experienced again. For someone living in loneliness, memories become a way to escape the reality of the present. Sitting quietly, they may close their eyes and allow themselves to return to those moments, imagining that nothing has changed. For a brief time, the house feels alive again, filled with voices and movement. The silence disappears, replaced by the familiar sounds of a life that once existed. But this escape is temporary, and when the eyes open again, the contrast between past and present becomes even more painful. Memories also carry a sense of longing, a desire to go back to a time when everything felt right. A person may find themselves asking questions that have no answers, wondering if things could have been different, if something could have been done to hold on to those moments a little longer. This reflection can bring both comfort and regret, creating a mix of emotions that is difficult to separate. Over time, the past can begin to feel more real than the present. The current days may seem empty or repetitive, while memories are rich with emotion and meaning. This shift makes it harder to fully engage with the present, as the heart remains attached to what has already passed. Yet, these memories are also a reminder of the love that once existed, proof that life was once filled with connection and happiness. Even though they can be painful, memories are often held onto tightly because they are all that remains of a time that cannot return. They become a silent treasure, something deeply personal that no one else can take away. And in those quiet moments, when the world feels distant and empty, these memories continue to live on, keeping a part of that lost life alive within the heart. The fear of dying alone is not always loud or obvious. It often exists quietly in the background of a person's thoughts, growing stronger in moments of silence. It is not just about death itself, but about the idea of leaving this world without anyone nearby, without a familiar voice, without a hand to hold in those final moments. It is the realization that after a lifetime of relationships, love, and shared experiences, the end might come in complete solitude. This fear becomes more real as a person grows older and begins to notice the absence of people who once filled their life. The house becomes quieter, the days become longer, and the presence of others slowly fades away. With each passing year, the possibility of being alone at the end starts to feel less like a distant thought and more like an approaching reality. It is not something that is often spoken about, but it is deeply felt, especially in the quiet moments when there is nothing to distract the mind. For someone who has spent their life surrounded by family, the idea of dying alone carries an even deeper emotional weight. They remember a time when they were needed, when their presence mattered, and when they were never truly alone. The contrast between that past and the present creates a sense of disbelief, as if something so full of life could slowly become so empty. It leads to questions that have no easy answers, wondering how the people who once depended on them are no longer there when they are needed the most. This fear is not always about physical absence, it is also about emotional absence. Even if people exist somewhere in their lives, the lack of connection can make it feel as though they are already alone. The thought that no one might know or notice when something happens, that there may be no one to check in or offer comfort, can be deeply unsettling. It creates a sense of vulnerability, where even small health concerns or moments of weakness feel much more serious because there is no one to rely on. Moments of illness often make this fear more intense. When the body becomes weak and the need for care increases, the absence of support becomes impossible to ignore. Lying in bed, feeling unwell, and having no one to call or depend on can bring a person face to face with their deepest fears. It is in these moments that the thought of dying alone no longer feels distant but painfully close. Despite this fear, many people continue to carry on with quiet strength. They do not always express what they feel, choosing instead to face their days with acceptance and resilience. They may push these thoughts aside during the day, focusing on routine and small tasks, but at night, when everything is still, the fear can return stronger and harder to ignore. What makes this fear so powerful is not just the idea of death, but the longing for connection until the very end. The desire to have someone present, someone who cares, someone who acknowledges their existence in those final moments remains deeply rooted in the human heart. It reflects a lifetime of love, a need to feel remembered and valued even in the last breath, and a quiet hope that no matter how life has changed, no one should have to face their final moments completely alone. Unconditional love from parents is one of the purest forms of love that exists because it does not depend on circumstances, behavior, or return. It begins the moment a child comes into their life and continues to grow without limits or conditions. Parents do not measure this love based on how much they receive in return, nor do they reduce it when they are hurt or neglected. It remains constant, even when everything else begins to change. This kind of love is shown in countless ways, often through actions rather than words. It is present in the sacrifices parents make, the care they provide, and the support they give without hesitation. They stand by their children during both success and failure, offering encouragement when things go right and comfort when things fall apart. Their love does not disappear when mistakes are made. Instead, it becomes stronger, guiding and protecting even in difficult times. What makes parental love truly unconditional is its ability to endure distance and silence. Even when children grow up, move away, and become less present in their parents' lives, the love does not fade. Parents continue to think about them, worry about their well-being, and hope for their happiness every single day. They may not always hear from them, but their concern and affection remain unchanged, quietly existing in the background of their lives. This love is also forgiving in a way that is difficult to fully understand. Parents may feel hurt when they are ignored or forgotten, but that pain does not turn into hatred or resentment. Instead, they make excuses for their children, convincing themselves that they must be busy or facing their own struggles. They protect the image of their children in their hearts, choosing to remember the good moments rather than focusing on the pain of the present. Unconditional love also means giving without expecting anything in return. Parents do not raise their children with the idea that they will be repaid later in life. They give because it feels natural, because it is part of who they are. Even when they receive little attention or care in return, they do not stop loving. Their happiness continues to be tied to their children's well-being, even if they are not included in their daily lives anymore. As time passes, this love often becomes quieter, but it never disappears. It exists in small gestures like keeping old photos, remembering birthdays, or waiting for a call that may never come. It shows in the way parents speak about their children with pride, even when they feel a sense of distance. Their love remains rooted in the past, in the present, and in the hope that the connection might one day feel strong again. What makes this kind of love so powerful is that it does not weaken under neglect or absence. It continues to exist, steady and unchanging, even when it is not returned in the same way. It is a reflection of a deep emotional bond that cannot be easily broken, shaped by years of care, sacrifice, and shared experiences. And even in moments of loneliness, that love remains alive within the heart, holding on to the belief that no matter how far life may take their children, the connection between them can never truly disappear.